everyone, Dr. Sam Dubé here on behalf of Agora Media and the Toronto Business Journal, and it's my pleasure to welcome with us today our guest, Suzanne Sue Beckley. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to contextualize this interview. This is occurring in mid-January of 2021 during the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, where I'm sitting right now in Canada, we've experienced the second maximal lockdown. And I know Suzanne's also experienced similar where she is at the moment. So Suzanne is a wife, a mother, a former Army specialist. She works for a scientific publication company, I believe doing graphical artwork, among other things. And she is also a practitioner of quantum healing hypnosis technique, or QHHT. Now, Suzanne, I'm going to call you Sue. Sue and I have had several conversations actually leading up to this interview, and I must say that number one, I was struck at how humble you were, and you said something to me. You said, "Sam, this is my truth. This is my truth." And so there was this air of kind of non-judgment that emanated from you, which I found very engaging and very appealing. And so we both kind of resolved to be open-minded during this interview, and I will be certainly asking you questions that I think our viewers would like to pose, as well as for myself. But you have some knowledge that's quite esoteric, and we would like to find out what you can do to help people and empower people, especially during this very difficult time. It's now the beginning of 2021, as I mentioned, but 2020 will go down in recent history as a year of trials and tribulations, confusion, and so much more for so many more people. So without further ado then, Sue, could you tell us a little bit about your journey? And we can get into QHHT anytime you want.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me, Sam. I really am thrilled to be here and talking with you. You're so much fun to talk with. I mean, we could go on and on. So
Definitely.
I will try to be succinct on some things, especially my history, because it's a long one. But in my 20s, well, we'll start with when I was born. I was born into a Roman Catholic family and upbringing. And I never quite filtered in the dogma of the church. There were too many things that just didn't sit right with me, that I was told growing up and learning how to be a Catholic. And so I've always had a questioning mind. My mind just always says, but what if it isn't that? What if it's something else? And what could it be? And so being that I had some issues with my faith from birth, I was looking into many different other religions and reading different things. And then about my 20s, I had my first child in my first marriage, and things weren't going so well. My upbringing was a little bit different in how I wanted to raise my own child and how I wanted to have a relationship in my life. So I sought out counseling, and I went to a spiritual counselor, and his name is Bob. And he helped me incredibly to sort out matters that I had some cognitive dissonance about. And we spent almost 7 years together in counseling, but he became my teacher in all matters spiritual. And so when I had my first hypnosis session with Bob, it was to determine the source of my constant sinus infections. And then, so he kind of said, let me regress you and see if we can come to the real source of what this is all about. Because I had surgery, I had sinus polyp removal, and I was still having infections. That wasn't good for somebody who was working and raising a young child. And he regressed me, but we went so far back, I was in another life. He did the grounding technique, which is just orienting me to where I was in the hypnosis. And I was a man in the late 1700s, and I was a logger. I was a loner. I lived by myself, and I cut wood for a living and brought it into town every so often. So anyway, I had a sinus infection, and I think I was too stubborn to go ask for help. I just thought I'd get over it all on my own, but it got to the point where I could no longer sustain my own life because I was in so much pain and the fever, and that the fire was out. There was no water because it was wintertime and it was snowing. It was very, very cold. And I couldn't even get out of bed to go melt some water so I would have something to drink and stoke the fire. And I died. He brought me forward in that life to that death and dying experience. And it was the most peaceful thing I've ever encountered in my whole life. I felt when my soul, if you will, left my body. And I knew I was me the whole time. I knew I was Sue Beckley while I was sitting on that couch being regressed. So I just want to point out that when you go into hypnosis, it doesn't mean that you lose your ability to know who you are or that you could be compelled to do anything you don't want to do. This is just an altered state of consciousness, okay? So I was aware that I was myself as a female back in 1990. No, I'm sorry, that was in 89. So I was aware of that, but I was also this man. And when I died and left the body, the peace and the freedom and just absolute complete wellness that I felt was beyond words that I can give you, but it was absolute. I mean, there was no question in my mind that I was perfectly fine. And I was looking down on my body as that man. And I had no fear, no sadness, no regret. It was just wonderment and beauty and the smells and the music I could hear isn't music as we would consider per se, but it was tones. There were these tones I was hearing, not a harp, if anybody's wondering about that. It's just tones.
Oh,
And so from that experience, that Bob allowed me to witness. He brought me out of hypnosis and we talked about it. We processed it for quite a while. And well, as he was bringing me out, I'll mention this. He set the intention and the suggestion, we call that suggestion in hypnosis, that I asked me if I was willing to let go of the fear of that circumstance. So when you're dying, when you're very, very sick and you're dying, there's a lot of fear in a human. Okay. A lot of, and then when you're powerless on top of the fear, it creates a trauma. And so that trauma I had carried over into this lifetime unknowingly, obviously, because at that point in time, when I had the hypnosis done on me, I was on a fence between whether I believed in reincarnation or not. It certainly wasn't something that I learned in my faith.
right.
So as we talked about the session afterwards and processed, I said, so why would I carry over something from one lifetime to the other? And we talked about it quite a bit. And I came to understanding that sometimes when we don't learn a lesson or we don't understand it, or if we have a traumatic death, that energetic carries over into another lifetime so that we have an opportunity to resolve it in the next lifetime. And we'll keep carrying things over until we get it. And it's not a punishment. What it is, it's the soul's desire to look at it as like a challenge or a lesson that we intend as a soul to learn. So as a human being, that sounds like a big ask. But as souls, we're all powerful and we know our connection to God and to Source. And so we just say, oh, yeah, I really want to resolve that. Let me take that into the next lifetime again so that I can get over it. And what it did for me, not only did it explain why I was having sinus infections and also fear of the cold. I was always very afraid as a child when my face would get cold, but it also helped me to never be afraid of death again and to also be very aware that we are eternal beings, that, just because we shed a body doesn't mean we end and cease to be. We go on and on and on and on. So as a 20-something having that experience, and then I had another regression with Bob about another issue, I had come to understand and get very excited that there was healing to be had by having these experiences. And I wished it for everybody. I wished everybody could have that experience. And so I thought that going into social work and then eventually getting my master's degree, or maybe going into, becoming a psychologist or a psychiatrist, one of those things that would lead me to a position in a place where I could do the work. Well, after a lot of years doing that kind of thing with continuing my education and working in the field, I realized that it wasn't for me. There were some severe limitations to doing the kind of work that I was doing with people that I couldn't stand anymore. I couldn't continue to do it because, in other words, like, for example, if you're only given 5 sessions with a person because that's what their insurance tells you they can have, what am I going to do in 5 sessions with somebody who's maybe had, who knows, maybe was game raped when they were 15 years old and they've carried that trauma through their lives and it's pouring out and spilling into their lives? How am I going to help that in 5 sessions? I mean, I might be able to just, a little bit or something, but to me, I wanted to do something that was more empowering, more giving an individual their ability to find their own answers, and which is what I found when I was hypnotized. And then, so years later, after the Army, after grad school, all of that stuff, I'm doing my work as a graphic designer, social media person. I just tuned into YouTube, for something interesting to listen to, and I happened onto Dolores Cannon, the creator of QHHT. And I was absolutely fascinated. I connected immediately, and I felt her truth. I mean, I'm an empath, so I'm like a lie detector, right? If I'm reading something, I'm hearing something, or I'm seeing something, I know the truth of a situation. So anyway, I felt it, and I said, I hope this is happening. I hope it's being offered as a course so that I could take it and become a practitioner. And sure enough, it was. So I went and had my own session. It was incredible. I went to a practitioner in Rochester, and when she hypnotized me, I found myself in the Great Central Sun. If people don't know what that is, that's just another term for pretty much the source where we all come from. And I had all my questions answered that we had set out to answer before the session. And I even had my heart healed. I did not know I had a problem with my heart, but we do a body scan, what's called a body scan, somewhere during the process. And that is just to check with the higher self to see if there's anything in the body that the individual needs healing for. And then we don't do the healing as practitioners. We ask the higher self to come in and do the healing, or to call in a team of spiritual specialists that deal in that process, whatever the problem is, and help with the healing, and then also tell the client what they need to do to maintain their healing. So when she did the body scan, I'm thinking, they're not going to find anything. I'm perfectly healthy. And before you know it, I see my heart come right up in front of my eyes. I have my eyes closed, but we call it our third eye. And I'm looking at my heart, and it's beating, and I see this light come in. And it's a few seconds, like maybe 10 seconds. And then I said to her, it is done. And oh my gosh, I felt so much better afterwards. And so she said, could you tell Sue what it is that caused this issue, so that she can know, and from moving forward on, that she won't repeat the same energies that caused the problem in the first place. And they said to me she had sustained many heartbreaks and has not been giving enough energy to herself. She is spreading herself too thin. She is trying to rescue. And so her energy is depleted, and she feels it in her heart, and it is weakening her heart. So, okay. Amazing, incredible for me. No one can ever tell me that experience wasn't real. And I decided to go ahead and sign up and do it. And I loved it from square one. I took the online course, and so they used Dolores's videos, her tutorials, and her lectures. So it's just like being in the room with Dolores, even though she's passed on, and her technique is incredible. And then I went ahead and studied with her protege, Candace Craw Goldman, who offers Beyond Quantum Healing, which adds so much more to what I already had. And the reason for that being because she's been a practitioner for so long. She's very, very good at what she does, but also she's so generous in offering new techniques, new ways to do things, new scripts, and a forum where we can talk about these things and we can share with one another when we have something phenomenal happening in a session. Without using the name of a client, we can talk about our experiences and learn and grow. And that's my mission, is to continue to getting better and better at what I do. But I've had a lot of success with people I've worked with so far. And I think if I'm just going to ring my own bell, I'm going to say it's because I'm a very non-judgmental person. I take people where they're at, and I want to hear their story, and I want to hear what their goals are, and I want to help them get to that point of empowerment, self-empowerment, where they can heal themselves. So they won't even need me again. That's always my goal. Now, if someone needs to come back for another session, for whatever reason, that's fine. I don't put any judgment on that either. And I would think, Sam, as a healer yourself, wouldn't you think that makes sense? Or even a teacher, you're also a teacher, and any teacher I've ever spoken to, the idea is not to have the student forever. It is to help them find the tools to go ahead and carry on the work on their own.
Yeah, and even to end up teaching too, if possible, right? So, wow, Sue, there was a lot there. So I'm going to just mention a couple things. So one, you're talking about the idea of a regression. So presumably you were being hypnotized to access what you perceive to be memories of past lives or a past life. So this is a very old idea. In fact, it's fundamental to many South Asian spiritual practices, the concept of having lived before and cycles and reincarnation. Just to put things into context, and you did say to me that you can ask me anything because I don't attach myself to this the ideas so much, and I'm not offended by anything. So that's really good to know, and I don't mean any offense. I was exposed to this idea since I was very young, and I remember my mother reading the actress Shirley MacLaine's books. I think Out on a Limb was probably the first one I saw her reading. I can't remember how old I was at the time, but this might have been in like the early 80s or something. And I remember my mother discussing this with me, and some of it just kind of stuck because as you, I was raised Roman Catholic, and you kind of get one shot, right? So like, and because my background is math and physics originally, I always thought about the idea of experiencing past life memories and perhaps like a sympathetic resonance of sorts where, us localized in this space and time, we have a similar type of emotional, energetic experience or something, and that will resonate with someone else's life somewhere else through space and time. And so my take on it was more of, okay, we have a commonality and we're actually accessing other aspects of the universal consciousness, which is us essentially, but modulated through these bodies and nervous systems. In other words, I had problems believing that these were actual lives we'd lived before, that maybe we can look at it more as these are past lives that we have access to, and we can still learn from them. And in a chat that we had, you mentioned something about the old overhead projectors with the plastic sheets that you write on, and how you would superimpose these as layers, and you could choose which one you wanted to focus in on, just like you would choose which past life memories you wanted to focus in on. So now that being said, and I've said my piece, to keep my integrity, so to speak. You did mention that people don't necessarily need to believe the structure that you've described, the system that you've described, but that they needed to be open to the messages and the information that you could derive from such a session, like a QHHT session. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Absolutely. So, really, my opinion of all of what we're talking about is we're just talking about energy work. Okay. So my belief system is that we're connecting to the energy that we're eternally connected to, which all goes back to source, the all, God, whatever you will call it. And that's why we're always interconnected. And that's why what I do to you, I also do to myself, because that connection is never severed. Now, what happens when somebody comes in and says, I don't believe in God? Okay, that's fine. You've come to me. I know that this person has come to me for a reason. They've been energetically attracted to my energy signature for whatever reason. And I don't have to know why. I don't even question it. I just know that if they're coming, there's a reason for it. So I speak in terms of consciousness exploration. And this is, our consciousness is energetic. It's been proven medically that when we have thoughts and when certain areas of the brain are stimulated, or while we're talking, they'll measure what area of the brain, or they, if they're emotional, or if they're talking about science, or if they're, so which parts of the brain are activated. So, there's a bio, let's see,
Like a biological.
Yes, there's a biological proof, and there's electromagnetic energy that happens when we think or when we speak and all those kind of things. So I will meet the client wherever they are and say, okay, this is your truth. We're going to work with it. Are you willing to quiet the part of your brain that is your protection center, your left brain? Are you willing to relax and trust that I will help you quiet that part of your brain, but that I will always be here for you during this session? And now let's explore the other part of your brain, which is your subconscious. And let's see if we can get some of these answers that you're seeking, or, information that you're questioning. And usually that helps, because a person can feel that I am respecting their belief system. And I do. It's true. It's not a game. It's not fake. It's, everybody has a truth, and all truths are true, depending on our own perspective, how we've been socialized growing up, and what our belief system is overall. Our beliefs are what creates our truth. So, and I think that's flexible. You and I talked a little bit about quantum physics, and we talked about research, and we talked about truth. And I wondered if you would agree with me that that truth can be a flexible thing, or that it can be expanded.
Well, yeah, I mean, depending on where you're at, you're going to, modulate a perception, right? This is it. So like my personal belief is that, when we talk about woo-woo, because you used the term woo-woo once with me, right? And back in the 80s, when the New Age movement was kind of taking off, it was described as, woo-woo and kind of like, touchy-feely, this and that, and having no scientific basis. But then there was a movement to try and correlate scientific discovery with some of these so-called New Age ideas, a lot of which were based in Eastern thought, and were thousands of years old. But I think that spirituality and religion are kind of two different things. There's overlap, certainly, but spirituality is the fundamental connection, I think, that you can have to more than what we may be able to perceive. And so this is where faith, the idea of faith and then belief without necessarily seeing things or having proof, more accurately, comes into play, versus religion, which tends to involve, ritual and tradition and the cultural trappings surrounding a spiritual tradition, a spiritual belief, for lack of a better term. And so I think that a lot of the woo-woo can be, all religions can have a certain level of woo-woo, if you want to look at it that way. So to answer your question, yes, truth can be said to be relative, depending on where you're at, what you perceive, how you metabolize reality, what you need in your journey. That we talked about how, you get what you need in a session. Well, how do I know I'm getting what I need? How do I know I'm not being deceived by some disembodied entity from Atlantis claiming to be Ramtha or something like that? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
like there are some arguments, Sue, that people who are mildly or strongly scientifically minded will say, like, so I say to you, how do you know for sure you lived these past life experiences? And you said, no one can take that truth away from me. I've had too many of them. I feel it to be true in my heart. Okay, I can't take that away from you. I just can't. Have I had some interesting, strange experiences? Absolutely, I have. Do I choose to describe it in maybe a subtly different way that incorporates my background, including math and physics and my medical background and such? Yes, yes. But is there overlap between what you're saying and what I'm saying or what I believe? Because this interview is not about me, despite appearances to the contrary now. Damn it. There is definitely overlap. And so that's what I think we're trying to look at today, right? So I do agree with you on that. And especially, when you talk about the quantum, so quantum is used as a buzzword, right? It's used as a buzzword. What does quantum mean? Quantum is just used to describe discrete energy levels. That's all. You talk about energy being quantized or a quanta, an amount of energy. So it dates back to looking at electron shells, valences, energy levels in electrons, and bonding, ionic, covalent being a spectrum, that sort of thing. But the term got kind of co-opted because it was cool and because the implications of quantum mechanics could be extended in some interpretations to things such as the many world hypothesis, parallel universes, or multiple realities, infinite number of realities. There are some pragmatic concerns with these perspectives. For instance,
or even Schrodinger's cat. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, yeah. But this is what I was thinking of when I said that. Is the cat alive or dead? Do we know, or is it in a state of quantum flux where once we observe it, it crystallizes into that probability amplitude, and there it is. But until we observe it, it's in a state of 1 over root 2, dead and alive. You know what I mean?
No, I don't, but I'm going to take your word for it. I kind of get what you're saying.
It goes back to my quantum electrodynamics days. But anyway, the idea is like exactly what you said. So quantum mechanics can imply some pretty interesting things. There's different interpretations, and there's one that kind of dominates, but there's others out there that didn't get a lot of airtime. So this is where New Age kind of picked up a lot of things. And Deepak Chopra wrote a book called Quantum Healing. And the idea that we are truly non-local in our consciousness and that we have access to a universal superconscious, and we can get information and we can access healing and wholeness from that. And that's why he called it quantum healing. And he was big with the transcendental meditation people for many years. And then he left the movement because I think he got big enough in the sense that what his message was bigger. And I don't think he wanted to be constrained by the movement. And I've met and spoken with Deepak Chopra about his work when I was very young, and there's definitely something to it, and a strong belief on his part in what he was doing. There's no question. Anyway, I want to stop talking here. Because I'm passionate about this stuff, as you can tell. I'm passionate, and
I love it.
Yeah, and in the 80s and 90s, I used to go to conferences and listen to people talk about this, and people put themselves into state, allegedly channeling entities. And of course, I was, if you can believe it, cockier back then. And I would get into arguments with these channeled entities. And I would leave feeling like this isn't legit what I'm listening to. Like, really, I see some technique here involved in dictation, brainwashing, speech patterns, things that I'm not convinced. And to add insult to injury, I'd go to a conference or a convention, more accurately a convention, and I would meet 3 people that claimed to have been the Virgin Mary. Or 5 guys that claim to be Napoleon, right?
Let me stop you for a quick second, because what's coming in for me to say to you now is 2 things. Channeling. I really, really want to hit this 2 ways. First of all, there's charlatans, and they've been, from back in the gypsy days and probably way before that. Okay, so that exists and it happens. People are being played. So they've given everybody else a bad name. But the most important thing I want to say is that, okay, and I just lost it because something else came in at St. See, my brain is going so fast that my mouth can't keep up.
Kind of like me. I'm not going anywhere. So you were talking about the charlatans.
So you got charlatans, okay, and then with channeling, because I do it myself, I don't do it a lot because it's very draining for me. But like channeling other people for other people, it's very draining for me. That's not my purpose here anyway. But we each have the ability to channel. If we can quiet our minds, we all have the ability. So it's not really special. Some people just are way more in tune with their ability to do that. They can get very connected in their heart center, and it's easy for them. Some of them are born with it, okay? But we all have our own filter as human beings. So I want to say this to you because it's very, very important for us to go within ourselves. And this is, again, why I love quantum healing and QHHT, because the client is getting their own truth. They're not getting it through my filter. So if I'm channeling for the client a message from somebody that really wants to come in and give them this message, it's always coming through my filter. And that's all of my experiences growing up. That's all the things I've ever been told and read and saw, and my own personal energetic experience of life. And I'm getting those messages and putting them through all of those filters to try and get the message to the person. This is why it's really, really optimal if we can get our own messages. We're using hypnosis to tap in, and we are in effect channeling, because now we're to the point where our thinking mind has calmed down and our feeling connection, energetic connection to all that is now opening up and willing to hear and listen.
Right.
So anybody that's channeling anything, any entity, any collective group consciousness, whatever, we have to remember that, number one, they could be a charlatan, but number two, they could be just, if it doesn't resonate with us, it doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means that's the information, how it comes through their own filter. And this is why, and I wrote a piece on this on my website, there are no gurus. This is why I say to you, I can only give you my truth because it is what I know to be true for me through my filters, my experiences in life, and how I interpret this information, how my mind works. So it isn't just energy we're talking about tapping into. We have to filter all of that through our life experiences and then through our brains, which is our processing center. It's our computer. And so this is why everybody's truth is true, because of that reason. And I say that truth is malleable because I change my mind about things I have through my life. 1 minute, this is true for me, that we get one shot at it, at life, and I better make it a good one because I'm going to hell if I don't, right? Or if I don't treat people the right way, I'm going to hell. That was our original thought, or what we were taught. And then the next minute, I have this experience on Bob's couch, and my truth completely changed. Well, I was already starting to suspect that multiple lives was more the way. Like, why would a loving God give you one shot and then punish you if you didn't get it right? That's how my mind worked. So anyway, this is why I say try to be flexible with our truths, because unless it's like a universal truth, which I think there are those, and I would suggest that is, treat others how you want to be treated. I think that's true for all of us because it comes back around, So it may not happen right away, and they call that karma, when something comes back around and slaps you in the face. It may not happen right away. It may be a couple of years before something comes back around and you experience what you just did to that other person, but it does come back around. So I want to be nice to everybody, and I want to give people compassion, even if they're acting badly, because if I was acting badly, I would want some compassion, and I would want the chance to have another chance to make it right. And so these are my philosophies, but these are my truths, and I've come upon them after 51 years of walking the earth. We have to allow that there are things that we have not experienced yet that would add to our truth that we just haven't experienced yet, and then we allow it to expand.
Okay. I wanted to pick up on some of the things you just said, but I also want you to take us through a typical QHHT session, like if you just describe to us typically what would occur and what to expect. And I know every session is different, but just to give our viewers an idea of what the practice, what the technique entails, please, Sue.
Okay. Well, I first usually get contacted by email by someone who's interested in a session. And so we set up an appointment to talk on the phone because this is how I feel into an individual's energy. And I try to find out how they found me and what they're interested in. Why are they looking for a session and have they ever had one before? And because the one thing I don't want is for someone to watch somebody's session online, YouTube or whatever, and say, "Oh, I'm going to have that happen for me." Because you had talked about like how could there be 5 Cleopatras and all that kind of stuff. So, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. I haven't forgotten that question, but I want to see what a person's expectations are. I don't automatically take a client on if I don't think I can help them. And so if somebody is wanting me to save them from something, I have to let them know I can't promise you healing. I can't promise you answers. I can't promise you anything other than we will try to get you to quiet your mind and you will find your own answers. And then it's not even my responsibility once you get those answers if you implement them or not. Because whatever guidance you're given, it is complete. We are free will. That is a law of the universe, is free will. So whether you implement that guidance you were given or not, whether you believe in it or not, completely up to you. And so I try to kind of very gently but clearly make those statements when I'm talking with somebody. Like after I hear what their intention is, if I find that somebody is just, well, I think I lived in the time of Atlantis and I want to prove it. And I'll say to them, you're going to get what you're going to get, because once we get into your subconscious, your higher self is going to give you the experience that you need, not necessarily what you want. And so I try to be very clear about that. So the session is set, the person agrees and understands what I'm saying to them, and then we have our session. What I do for the first couple of hours is I get to know the person. I ask them questions about their history, their family life, and what, if anything, in their life they're interested in changing. Usually they've told me all of this. I don't have to ask at the end of the conversation because they come in with a list. I send out in email some suggestions and tips, and in those tips I say, if you can come to the session with a list of things, questions that you want answered, or any kind of physical healing that you're interested in, please come prepared with your list, or send it to me the night before so I can peruse it. That way we can set the intention for the session. That gives me a guidepost for the kind of questions that I'm going to be asking them during the hypnosis. Their higher self or other spirits will come in. So, it isn't just the higher self that we're talking to. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So once I get them nice and comfortable, make sure that they're, they've been fed, they went to the bathroom, all that kind of stuff. And I don't feed them, but they eat before they come. And
Nope.
yeah. Because I don't know about allergies and stuff like that, right? So
that's practical,
yeah. So they get nice and comfortable and make sure their body temperature is comfortable. And then we just go into a very nice meditation and do some visualization. And then I start the induction. And that takes anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 minutes, depends. Sometimes individuals, they have a hard time shutting off their thinking mind, their analytical mind. And so it takes a little bit longer for them, but the pre-talk is important because we're mixing energies before I've even attempted to start hypnosis. And what I mean by that is they can feel my energy and know that my intention is to be there for them, to hold a space for them, that I care about their well-being, and that I'm going to take the very best care of them during the hypnosis. So usually it doesn't take very long for me to get a person into that theta brainwave state, which is hypnotic. And So then once they're there, I ground them. And all that means is I have them look at their feet or look at their surroundings, and we try and get details as to who and what they are, where they are, what time period. And then after that, we can explore the life that they've landed in, if it is a life. Well, I mean, it's always a life, but not everybody is corporeal. Am I saying that word the right way?
Corporeal.
Corporeal. Thank you. I always had trouble with that word.
Of body, having body.
Of body, having a body. There you go.
French call body, right?
Yeah. Latin, yes. Corpus Christi, right?
Yes, that's right, corpus.
Yeah. So
French, boys and girls.
I took Latin for 2 years. I've forgotten most of it.
Oh, it's great. I mean, they hardly teach it anymore except in private schools, and it really that and ancient Greek. I mean, it's foundation of scientific and other technical terms, so
pretty much all the other languages, right?
Western, well, a big chunk of the Western ones, some of them no, like Finnish, which has more of an Hungarian Asian influence, and a few other ones, but yeah, the Western ones, yeah. So Albanian, that's an Iceland. That's a weird one. That's an very interesting history there.
That's another video, Sam.
Please go on.
We could talk about that forever. So once we establish the who, the what, the where, then we start helping. I start helping them by asking questions. The why. Why have your team brought you to see this lifetime? And usually by the time they're fully embedded in what they're experiencing, so they could have a body, they could be in any time period, or they could be on a planet that we've never heard of, that they don't even have words for us to understand, but they're just an energy. And maybe there are other energies on this planet and they work collectively to raise consciousness, for example. So, and then I was saying earlier today, I had one lady who was, when I grounded her, she realized that she was the air in the very beginning of the earth. She was a spirit that came to help create the air in the atmosphere so that life could sustain on earth. So she was important, one of the important spirits that came here to begin that process of implanting life on the earth. Mm-hmm. So that was a fun one, because it took me a while to ground her. She was speaking in scientific terms that I didn't understand, so I had to dial it back a little and work a little longer to establish what we were talking about. She was talking way over my understanding of science, and then when I said, okay, do you have a body? And then we got back to that. But anyway, once we establish where the person is, who they are, then we try to find out the why. Why have we been brought to this lifetime? What is it important for them to see? And usually we haven't even reached the higher self at this point in time. I'm just talking to the person as that soul in that lifetime through the person that is this soul in this lifetime. Mm-hmm. So really talking to two different souls, if that makes sense. And their higher self is the being that is all of them. So that's aspects.
These aspects are like the manifestations of, they're like different souls of the same higher being.
Yes, thank you for saying that better than I did. Yes.
Just trying to understand that you're what you're expounding on, your belief.
Yeah, and so we could have an aspect. In other words, we could have an aspect here on Earth that's here now, and with you and me, and there may be another aspect of our higher self having a lifetime on the Pleiadians as what we would call an alien, or anything you can imagine. There can be an aspect of yourself doing it. So that whole idea of parallel lives is a real thing. And sometimes we tap into them. And I think you were talking about that earlier, how like all of a sudden you start feeling energetics from something that you can't quite put your finger on. You might be actually tapping into your own energy that might be having another experience. Mm-hmm. So without getting too much more in depth in the possibilities, because they're infinite, After that, what I do is I move them forward into that lifetime that they've experienced, and I ask them to come to the scene of their death in that life, or the ending of that life, and then I move them into a different dimension so that they can meet their spirit team, and then we call in their higher self. And the person that I'm working with has to give permission, because again, free will is the universal law. So I try to be very careful not to let somebody be re-traumatized in viewing a past life, especially, for example, somebody who died at the hands of the Romans in some horrible way. I don't allow them to be re-traumatized. I just keep them above the scene so they can view it. And then once we get to the spirit team and we call in the higher self, that's when we can get even more answers about that lifetime, because I will ask the higher self to explain to the person why they showed them that lifetime. What is it important for them to know about that lifetime? Is there any carryover? Is the trauma that they experienced carrying over into this lifetime? And if so, can that be healed? And the person that I'm working with just keeps answering because they're connected, obviously. And I can feel that energy anyway. That's the great thing about being a practitioner, is I get to swim in all those energies with everybody. And it's always for their highest good. So it's not anything evil that I have to worry about. I don't have to worry about demons tapping in or cutting in on a session because the energy is so high. It's not even an issue. We do protections before the session anyway. So after that, after they've gone to as many lifetimes, because I keep asking, as long as the higher self wants to show, we'll go to, as many as 4 or 5 lifetimes if the higher self feels it's necessary. And I check in with the body to make sure that the person's doing well, is feeling comfortable, doesn't have to go to the bathroom, that kind of thing. Then once we close and healing is received, energy is released, we bring more energy in to replace what the person has released. Then I bring them out of hypnosis and we have a talk about what they just experienced. It's recorded. So even if the person doesn't remember anything of what they just went through, I'll ask, how long do you think you were under for? And sometimes we're like, oh, I don't know, 2 hours. And I'll say, well, what would you think if I said you were doing this for 45 minutes or half an hour or whatever? Sometimes it takes less time, sometimes it takes more time, but it's always the same. People just don't have a real concept of how long they were just out there. And that's because there is no time. And by the way, I think that's what quantum means. Okay. I think that means connecting to the energy that you're seeking. And and because there is no time, it doesn't matter whether it was past, present, or future, past life, present life, or future life. The energy that you seek, the signature that you send out when you're asking the question and you're setting your intention for the session, that's where you connect. And that's why it doesn't matter whether you believe in a past life or not. If that's the energy you're asking for, that's the energy you get. And then we talk about it. And I always say to my clients, make sure you have a little something to eat, a little something to drink, get your body reoriented to where you are here in this place and time, especially before they drive, because I never want to send somebody away in an altered state of consciousness. But I've had some really amazing talks with people afterwards, and I've only had one person in all the sessions I've ever done feel worse than they did when they started. And
why would that be?
That's unfortunate. I don't know for sure. She went to one past life where she was in Pompeii, actually. And
Probably bad timing.
well, yeah, because she was a marketplace. Her husband had left her. I don't remember why. She wanted the reason she went to this lifetime, she wanted to know what her connection with her one son in this lifetime is with her. Did they have any other past lives? So that was her question and intention. And that's why they brought her to that lifetime where he was her child as well in Pompeii, but her husband had left for some reason, but she made a living by selling, like making baskets and goods, weaved goods. And then she also did some food items she sold in the marketplace. So then of course she was able to experience she actually choked to death. She didn't die from the lava or the ash. It was the poisonous gas that killed her. But I had to make sure she was safe and wasn't re-traumatized when she experienced that. But anyway, after that lifetime, I started asking questions about getting connected with her higher self, and she just didn't want to do it. And she started talking about having a severe headache. And so I started doing some meditational work with her on bringing energy in to soothe the headache and whatnot. And she said, I know what you're doing. I appreciate it, but I don't want to do this. And I'd like to stop now. And I said, okay, I respect that. And, so I brought her out. I made sure I counted her out of hypnosis. It was like the only person I've ever had that actually walked away feeling worse than they did when they came in. Most people are kind of energized, and some of them are just sort of sleepy and they really want to think about what they just experienced. Their mind's a little blown, and I love it because they've blown their own mind. It's not me selling them some bag of goods or some truth that they have to accept. It's like it's their own experience, and they're just needing some time to filter in everything they just went through, and it's way better than anything I could ever tell them.
Sue, I mean, it's fascinating to hear, and there's no question that the technology inherent in our own biology and psychology and physiology is unknown and untapped. That's why I'm not a big fan of this Neuralink idea and computer chip implants, because I think we have so much further to go in our own development or rediscovering who we are. That being said, I could talk to you about this forever. So I wanted to direct our conversation towards something a little more contemporary. But first, I just want to clarify a few terms that you and I have actually come across and discussed, but that our viewers have not. So one of them was higher self that you talked about. And so you did mention the higher self being kind of like the overarching manifestation of being, and then aspects of that could be perceived as different souls, i.e. past lives. Okay.
I have a picture if you want.
Sure, absolutely.
I drew it. You have to excuse my artistic. I'm not usually a drawer. I'm a painter.
You're a painter? Oh,
or a graphic artist.
Don't be lazy, Sue, and I want to see that in Technicolor. Come on. Oil Technicolor. All right.
Someday, Sam, someday. Okay. All right. Can you see this?
Yes.
Can
you make it to us, please?
Can I do what now?
Can you explain it to us?
Yes.
Point it out so I can see source the one. I am the all. So different names for that kind of higher self, right?
Yeah. So I call God source. You can call God whatever you want, because God knows that you're talking to it. And I say it because it's not a he or a she. It's everything. Okay. So let's not get too into that stuff. Let's just say, for the sake of my point to you, this is source, all that is. Source decided it wanted to experience what it is to be not all there is. So decided to experience. And so it, in an explosion of whatever, I don't know when it all started, but all of a sudden, Source sent out many, 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 many infinite number of aspects of itself.
Oh, and started to play with itself. Oh, that's the term I use. And you said, no, explore itself, Sam, explore itself. Right? That's the self-ancient belief of the universe being lonely. And anyway.
Your truth is your truth, baby. So.
Thank you for being so diplomatic.
Hey, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I'm neutral. So whatever your belief is, but this is all of us, right? We all spark from source. And so the higher self is, we each have a higher self, which is the part of us, the energy, the biggest part of our energy that is the closest to source when we leave. Now notice there's a line here. It's because we're never disconnected.
Okay.
And our connection is eternally in our heart center. That's where we can reach and understand and know everything that we need to know, every question we ever have. And anytime we wish to talk to our guides, our spirit team, or people in other universes, or our deceased loved ones, it's all right here. Okay. So I won't talk too much about that, but you asked about the higher self. So this, if you're going along with me on this journey, let's just assume this is our highest self, highest. And it decides it wants to go to this universe, and now I want a lifetime in Pleiades, and maybe I'm going to go over here to Mars, wherever, planets we can't even think of names of, right? And then it's going to drop down to another existence, and then we're going to send an aspect of ourselves to another existence, and then before you know it. So this is kind of representative of dimensions, by the way. And I don't want to get too much into that because that's a real heady topic, but we go down to Earth, finally say, there's an aspect of us that says, I want to have an experience on Earth. And so this is us, I'll just say now in this current focus. These are just different focuses of this energy. So this is a place in time where we have part of our consciousness focused, and it feels like our reality. And because we've had to forget that we're connected to God to get to 3D density, we had to go through the veil of forgetting. We had to do that on purpose because Earth is about experiencing separation from Source. We decided we were going to do this. We did it to ourselves, right? So we're here, and this is what we think is the only thing existing. But in reality, it all exists. It's infinite. So, but the good news is we're still connected. We're always connected. We never lose that connection. Even when we die, we even become more connected because once we drop off the 3D body, we start to remember all this other stuff. It's right there. We go, oh yeah, that was just a play. That was just an experience I was having. That wasn't as real as I thought it was. But in this earthly body, and because we have this eternal connection, once I shut the brain off, or I don't shut it off completely, but once I get it to quiet down and have a seat, then the part of us that dreams, the part of us that is eternally connected could then start making connections with the spirit team that comes with us on this journey here. And then every other being in existence, all these other aspects, you, my family, your family, any ET that's out there, we can connect to any one of these because we were never disconnected. We just forgot. Does that make sense what the higher self is? Did I explain it?
Yeah. I mean, it's an old idea. It's an old conceptualization for sure. Thousands of years old, in fact. And, what's interesting is I think the first book I read that really tried to reconcile science and to some extent spirituality, and I know you're very interested in that, as am I, was a book written in 1973 called Brain, Symbol, and Experience. And I was exposed to it in the mid 80s by a professor of transpersonal anthropology named Charlie Laughlin, who was one of the authors. And it was a groundbreaking book because it basically was a book on the neurophenomenology of consciousness. And so basically they said that, brain is one aspect and mind is another. And along with mind, talk about some other potential aspects like, emotions and your perception and the possibility of a soul. And so they were two sides of the same coin. And so the idea of your experience being mediated and modulated by your nervous system was a big theme of the book. And the idea that you and I have some similar experiences because our nervous systems are very similar. And one of those experiences is our conceptualization and our experience of time, space and time. And so this brings up the idea of another term that I wanted to bring up before we forgot, was the idea of timelines that you had mentioned wanting to talk about. And so something interesting, and this is actually an old idea, but that in some of the things you and I discussed, we talked about how people get what they need or they experience truth based on where they are, right? They experience truth based on, and this is another term that's often used as a buzz term, and I want you to talk about it in your terms so that our viewers can understand that it's just used in a context of your belief system, and that is frequency, the idea of your energetic frequency. And to me, as a physicist, frequency means a certain thing, right? It's number of cycles per second based on an energy, or even I mean, I'm not gonna, I won't go into that because I'll just start defining things and giving a physics lecture, damn it. So, yeah. So in the context of what we're talking about, if you could define frequency and how the higher frequency allows you to experience, reality in a different way, and that you lose access to these lower levels of consciousness, if you will. And one thing I found very interesting was the idea that an interpretation of what's happening today in our confusing world with potential agendas of money, power, influence, and control going on by either humans or potentially otherwise, according to your belief system, that there are humans out there who are personifying some of these lower states of consciousness in agendas that they're pushing. And that for us to escape that, we need to pursue higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of being through, positive emotions, and through understanding our origins and learning from, past life experiences, and basically trying to be good people and hold on to these things, right? So can you talk to this idea of timelines then, because it's also a quantum mechanical, an extrapolation of a quantum mechanical concept, shall I say? Yes.
Sure. Okay. So you asked about frequencies. So I talked to you about this being dimensions, right? This being the ultimate dimension, the highest possible frequency would be the Godhead, source. So each time we go to a lower density existence, like a planet that's physical. So you would agree with me that the air is a lighter density than water?
Yes.
Right. So things that we can perceive with our eyes tend to be more dense than things you can't see with your eye.
Depends. If it's like transparent pudding, that's going to be denser than than smog, for instance.
Right.
Right? You can't see through, right?
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
This is an unscientific person trying to put it in scientific forms, but
I'll shut up.
No, okay. So I'm going to try and put it down to my level. So this is very light and high frequency, very, it's not dense at all. It's just, okay. This is what we call 3D, dimensional. It's very dense. It's very low vibrational.
Very material, perhaps. The energy
material, yes.
Matter, more so.
And the reason that it is this way is because this is a reality of separation, where we came to learn, we agreed ahead of time, and we signed up for it. Now, how do you experience being separate from God? You have to have examples of light and dark. So people signed up to experience the light side of things, to be the good guys, and people signed up to be the lower side of things and the dark side, because eventually they all flip-flop and we all get to experience it all. So in past lifetimes, we've been good guys, we've been bad guys, we've been victims, we've been perpetrators, and it's all good because it's experience, okay? Now, what's happening? You're talking about frequency. We come into each incarnation with a certain frequency. It can't be this frequency in a human body. The body wouldn't be able to hold it. So we had to drop our frequency of our higher self, which is so very high, into a lower frequency so that it can go into a body and the body doesn't disintegrate. This is my understanding. So we come in with a certain frequency, and that generally doesn't change throughout a lifetime, but what we can change is our vibration. So if you understand sound waves, you know that if you're tuning into a channel, there's a certain frequency and you can hear it, but you can't hear other frequencies. They're either lower wave, or they're either a bigger wave or a smaller wave. And so you can't hear it, right? When you tune into it on a radio station.
Yep.
So the
Yeah.
frequency that we attract into our lives are the ones that are similar to us because we can understand them. Now, if you came in as part of your life plan as to be one of the bad guys, one of the demons, one of the nasties, right? Your frequency is much lower. You're going to tend to hang out and be attracted to those lower frequency people as well. And you sort of come together and you have this little club and you do things the way that, say again?
Kind of like Hitler.
Yeah, and the Nazis, yeah, that's a good one. Or Stalin and his group, or Mao Zedong and his, and I'm sure you could go back to Attila the Hun, right?
Yeah.
So like attracts like, and that's a physical principle too, right? I think it's magnetic, but
well, our opposite charges attract. But
yeah, that's true. And magnetics opposites attract, but when it comes to molecules, so they're at a certain frequency. So the ones that stay water are attracted to each other, and the ones that are going at a higher frequency, they start moving into evaporation and into air. So the reason I talk about frequency is because when we talk about ascension, when we talk about making a better choice, when we talk about not playing in denser energies, what we're really saying is that we're starting to make choices as free will individual human beings to not be part of that darkness. But you can't know that you don't want to be part of it unless you see it. And so it exists in our reality as a choice point. We see examples of light and we see examples of darkness and every shade in between. And we are continually remembering. It's not that when we say we raise our frequency, what we're really saying is we're tapping into our higher frequencies. We've never lost them. We've just forgotten that we're that. We've forgotten. We came through the veil of forgetting and we come to this earth because we want to experience separation. We had to forget. You can't be separate from God and experience what it is to be separate from God if you remember that you're not.
So, Sue, the term frequency then is used because we are describing an energy state. Is that right? We're describing a kind of an ephemeral energy that, we may not be able to pinpoint as such yet in our level of technology, but this is what we're referring to. And so it's a descriptor of maybe a state of harmony with the universe or a state of consciousness.
Well, yeah, it's
I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and I always struggle to find the way that I understand this. I mean, it makes perfect sense in my head, and then when I try to find the words,
well, that's okay.
Quantum computing. You're a little bit aware of quantum computing.
Oh yeah, if they make a big breakthrough in that, Bitcoin's going down.
Well, that's what I hear, and I don't know what Bitcoin is, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
So if 3 different people ask the quantum computer the same question, they're going to get answers that may be similar, but they're 3 different answers. And my understanding is that the reason that is true is because the frequency that the computer picks up from our voice determines the probability that any particular outcome will come to pass.
Yes.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
So is it something that is palpable, our frequency? I would say yes. I tap into people's frequencies all the time because I have that ability and I use it. Everybody has that ability to use it, but they don't believe in it, or they're not used to, and they haven't been trained to feel it. So I'll just liken it to when you walk into a room. There's certain people you're attracted to go talk to, and there's other people that you're not, that for some reason, and you might not even know them at all, but you just don't have any interest in talking to them. Those are our frequencies communicating to each other. We're feeling each other, so the similar frequencies are attracting. So that's the same thing with a quantum computer. We put our frequency into the question, the computer can feel it and can suss out what the most likely outcomes are. So that goes into the discussion of timelines. And the best way I can put it is the more we believe in being a victim of anything or anybody, we're going to be swimming in the lower energies, the lower frequencies and vibrations, and we're going to bring that and we're going to put ourselves on a timeline where we're going to experience those things. So in other words, if I believe that I am not worthy of being loved, or that every other guy I've ever dated in my life has treated me like garbage, and so the next one's going to be the same. I just don't have any belief that I'm going to be treated well. That is what I'm going to bring into my reality. I'm going to be on a timeline where it's a different face, but it's the same scenario, because I have this belief and that has a vibration and a frequency. Our belief, our thoughts, our words, our deeds, all of that is the tool of creation. So that is how we get, with any given situation, there are infinite timelines. And as we get closer to the space-time continuum where the incident's going to happen, there's more probable timelines than others because of our frequency. If we make a change of heart right before something is due to happen, and it's possible to change the timeline we're on. It could be an instantaneous shift, but more than likely it's going to be some timeline in between the first one we were on and the ultimate timeline, which is our highest thought about something. Gosh, I'm being confusing.
No, I kind of get what you're saying, actually. I have some reservations about the idea of simultaneous infinite number of timelines. For one reason is the idea of, when you reach a decision point, what constitutes a decision point, right? Because how do you define a decision point? That's very difficult to conceive of, right? Like, when I consciously make a decision, or when one air molecule goes this way instead of that way, and then how the trillions and trillions and more Googleplex possibilities out there. So in quantum mechanics, we talk about collapsing the wave function, right, of probability amplitudes. And so, if you talk about, say, potential realities as an algebraic superposition, and then as we proceed perceiving time and space with our nervous systems and interacting with, this so-called linear stream because of our localization in space and time, if we talk about that, then we can say that we're collapsing that wave function as we go along, and that the reality we experience is actually conducive and relatable to our state. And this is where that whole idea of quantum computing comes in that you're referring to, is the state of the observer will collapse the wave function in a variable way, right?
Yeah.
And so you will.
And it's because of the frequency you're putting out. And so how do we raise our frequency? I think is kind of what you were asking me earlier.
Yeah.
And I will answer that by saying, use the tools of creation, which are thought, word, and deed. Our thoughts, our words, and our deeds determine what our reality will be. And it's based on our beliefs. So if I have a belief in a victim mentality, I'm going to keep creating. I'm going to speak like a victim. I'm going to walk like a victim, and I'm going to talk or think like a victim. And that's what I'm going to bring in as my reality, because it can be no other way. The universe can only give you what you put out. It doesn't care what you put out. It doesn't judge it. It just gives it back to you in the way that you believe. And so if we're talking about a vaccine, for example, and I believe, because I've read from this one and that one said on YouTube, and I saw it in the newspaper, that there are things inside this vaccine that are going to harm me or kill me. There's an energetic vibration to that thought process and that belief. And I've just now sent it out. And then I add to it that I'm going to be forced to take this. Because I work in a hospital, I'm going to be forced. There's more fear, which is a low vibration, low frequency emotion. So now I'm talking and I'm speaking and I'm doing research into this area, which is a one-way linear way of thinking, and that's my truth. That's what I believe is going to happen. Well, chances are you're going to be you're going to be placed in a situation where you're told you have to take this, and you take it and then it harms you because you've created it. You've believed all those sources outside of yourself that told you it was going to harm you. I would say, and I'm going to base this a little bit on the placebo effect and Dr. Emoto Masaro's work on water crystallization and how we speak to water and how it changes the chemical and physical composition of water. That's not true. There's another way of viewing. There's many ways of viewing the situation. So for my own personal picture from the beginning, I decided that I would not be forced to take a vaccine, and that if it ever came to pass that I had to, that it would be simple saline. There would be it would give me a little bit of hydration and I would be fine. Because that was what I believe. I believe we have the ability to transmute anything. We drink water that's not pure all the time. We breathe air that isn't pure all the time. We eat foods that aren't the most nutritious in the world. Why are some people sick and why are some people perfectly healthy? And my contention is it's because what we believe. So for instance, if I were to go to Mexico and believe all the baloney about how the water's dirty and this and that and the other thing, if I accidentally had a couple sips of water, I might get really violently sick. And that actually happened to a friend of mine. She brushed her teeth without using bottled water. And when she realized it, she suddenly became violently sick. I would say that's placebo effect. You know, her beliefs came manifest because that's what she told her body was going to happen. If I live like those ladies that live in Chernobyl, that went and moved back to Chernobyl, and supposedly their land is still tainted from the radioactive debris, but they don't believe that. They just go about their farming. They live their lives. They're not worried about it. They're not thinking they're going to be sick. They're happy to be home, back in their homelands. They're not sick. They're not cancer riddled. They're not dropping,
Is there a difference between ignorance of a situation or an influence or an effect and conscious manifestation of something more positive? So
yeah,
what my take is on this, what I'm trying to say is, when you talk about, not living in a victim mentality, can you go maybe one step further and say, can you try to consciously manifest your reality, knowing that you have that ability, like so many traditions and even success coaches starting back a few decades ago started to talk about the idea of the secret and the Celestine prophecy, and even Oprah got in on it, right? And but the idea is very old, is that we manifest our reality, and in the past, for centuries, even longer, we were calling it prayer, right? Where
yeah,
you're actually you're having faith in the outcome, where faith is a belief without proof, right? And so a lot of success coaches would talk about, don't think about the how, just think about the what, right? Like what is it that you want the outcome to be? Like you were saying, if you were to get a vaccine, you want the outcome to be harmless to you, and so you were kind of visualizing it would be nothing but saline. Or your perspective is, I'm not going to be forced to take this vaccine. So I can certainly see the power in that, because there is some evidence. If you read 1985's Margin of Reality by Jan and Dune, who were engineers in Princeton, and they did experiments that they could not explain. They could not explain the results because they were actually they actually had data that implicated human intention in altering the effects of random and quasi-random systems, but over thousands and thousands of trials, and the results are actually quite scary. And the Russians took that book very seriously in the research, and in fact, I had a colleague that actually went to Russia to talk about this with them, but over here it got very little press. And the idea
yeah,
is that over long periods of time, you can affect the systems, including, in other words, you potentially you may be able to influence reality around you through your mindset, through your mind
yeah.
state. So
Yeah.
Emoto talked about that.
Yep.
Um,
And I would say it's thought, word, and deed. Okay. So it isn't just intentionally thinking about it. It's talking about it. It's getting into the feeling of it. It is taking steps toward it. So I want to move to Florida this year.
okay.
I have a house here in New York, and I need to sell the house because I'm not independently wealthy. So in order to buy another house in Florida, well, how am I going to go about that? So that's my intention. That's my belief and what I want to do, and that's what I want. It's what I desire. So I think about it a lot, and then I look on Zillow at the properties, and I try to figure out areas where we want to be. And then I look at actual homes, and then I look at prices, and I look at taxes, and I look at what's available in the area for us, with this particular, I love this home, it's the perfect home, but the area doesn't have as much. So I'm putting a lot of energy into this future move. And I'm not giving myself a restriction on price, so to speak. So I'm not looking at $1 million homes, but I'm also not looking at the cheapest home I can get. I'm looking at what is the kind of home that we would feel comfortable in that wouldn't be too big and it wouldn't be too small, it'd be just right. And it would have some land around it so that I'm not right up against my neighbor. So I'm putting all this energy in, my husband and I are putting this energy into our picture that we're building. So we're thinking about it, we're speaking about it, and we're taking action toward it. And then I have to take more action because I have to paint some parts of this current house before it's ready to go on the market. I have to get rid of this paper because I'm not sure everybody would love it. And we have to fix the roof. And it hasn't been replaced in 30 years, so it's time. And so I'm doing deeds. But all the while, I'm not imagining anything going wrong with the plan. I'm not imagining that things are going to cost way more, or that I can't find a contractor, or that, when COVID happened, we could absolutely not get one single roofer out here. They'll say, oh yeah, we'll be with you in a week. They've even made appointments with us, many different contractors and companies that we called, and not one of them showed up. And I didn't put any fear into that. You know why? Because there was a pandemic going on, or that's what they tell us. And they couldn't show up, or they had restrictions, or this or that, or the projects that they were doing got shut down for so long that they had to catch up. But for not 1 minute am I thinking that it's not going to get done. It will absolutely get done. As a matter of fact, I needed an electrician for something. This is an older house I live in. And my neighbor, just in hearing me talk about something else, she was like, hey, I know a really good electrician. He's been awesome. He's fixed everything for us. So it came along, and I wasn't even thinking about it. It just happened in conversation. And this is how I believe the universe works. The more we focus on what we want to see in our world, the more we will see it. The more we look for things to be afraid of, the more we will find them. And we talked about this, Sam, you and I, about research.
Yeah.
It's basically the same thing. It's trying to answer a question. That's what research is. Well, it depends where you look, the answer you're going to get. And if I set out to prove something, I can prove it one way or another. I will find a group of scientists and I can prove it. And then I will find other evidence that will come up into my reality that will further prove it. Okay. So what we focus on, we attract and we bring it to us. And
gotta believe it, right?
The thing I want to say is, if we can look in our now moment and we don't see anything to be afraid of, then drop fear. And if there is something to be afraid of, then ask yourself, is it real? Am I really in danger of something right now? Is something happening to me right now where I need to be afraid? Because if there's a lion charging me, that's a realistic fear. And I need to maybe move or hide or something. But if I'm just sitting here going, geez, if I go to the store and get that gallon of milk I need, what if I run into somebody who's got COVID? Well, what if you do? You probably have and didn't even know it. So you asked, is there a difference between intentionally creating and being ignorant? Sometimes ignorance is bliss, because if we knew half the crap we were putting into our bodies, we'd never eat, right?
This is true, but it doesn't advocate you for not looking both ways before you cross the street, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't want to intentionally put ourselves in harm's way. I mean, I'm not going to go drink out of the toilet and say to myself, oh, this is yummy.
No, but when you're ignorant, that implies you don't know the risk necessarily, right?
Yeah,
You're not aware of it.
yeah.
So that's why I was trying to get a distinction there from you. But no, I understand what you're saying. So there's a balancing act here too, right? And but I understand what you're saying about the manifestation of reality. Um, I believe there's a measure of that. Um, and I did want you to define a few more terms, but we started talking about COVID and the vaccine. So I want to stay on that right now. So
Okay.
can you give us a little bit of your insight into what's going on with this pandemic? What happened and what's going on and what do you see happening in the future?
Well, from a purely spiritual standpoint, and someone who has been educated in international politics back in the day, um, my viewpoint of what has happened is there are forces that are small in number but seek to control the world. And they are working together to try and reduce the Earth's population and control us. And so, what better way to do that than to put out a dangerous vaccine, which we already know has been laboratory created? I'm sorry, not vaccine, a dangerous virus that has been laboratory created for maximum damage, and then disperse it in the earth. And then once everybody's good and scared and dead, we'll come up with a vaccine to fix the problem, and we'll make the pharmaceuticals billions, because we'll be the only show in town. And by the way, we'll keep scaring you and changing the narrative, and we'll lock you down, and we'll make you wear a mask so that you feel that you're not even a person and that you have no voice. I mean, if you walked in a store with a mask on and you talk to somebody and they look at you funny, like they didn't even know you could talk, it's like, it's a gag, you know? So I think it's a control mechanism and attempt on the part of individuals with nefarious intentions to make the rest of the world subversive, and keep them under our thumbs and making them money, and dying, you know, being kind enough to die by the time we get to an age where they don't believe that we're useful anymore. So the attack on the elderly. That's what I think happened. And the other thing that happened that I believe is that they thought it was going to be a lot more effective than it was. So the original ones that passed on, I think they had a life contract to leave at that time. That's my personal spiritual belief, was that they signed up to move on at that time, and it just happened to be the vehicle to do it. But the ones who weren't meant to leave the earth, they didn't leave, did they? Some of them got pretty darn sick, and they had to come to a choosing, I believe, on a soul level, whether they were going to stay or whether they were going to go. But everybody made their choice, and then all of a sudden you start hearing pretty early on about herd immunity. So the original impact, the ground zero of the biologic that was made in China, had its impact, but then it very quickly dissipated. Why is that? I wonder, what do you think? You're a medical doctor, so I
Well,
mean, you
yeah,
have
but I mean,
more insight.
what I've been hearing is that there are lockdowns occurring in major Chinese cities as we speak, mid-January 2021. That they are experiencing another outbreak, multiple outbreaks, but because we may not be hearing the full picture from the Chinese authorities, this is international information. This is less direct information. So, certainly being a numbers guy and having a medical background, I don't practice medicine clinically now. I'm an academic physician, although I do have the background in family and sports medicine. Um, but it's just the numbers just don't make sense, nor does the rationale. We're getting some conflicting information regarding masking and social distancing. The data, if you look at the data, you do a literature search on the effectiveness of social distancing and masking, and it doesn't come up as being that useful compared to other measures. There was a there was a movement in Europe, I think the Barrington Declaration for Focused Protection, and it got very little press, where the idea was to protect the vulnerable, the elderly and the vulnerable, which are
Yeah.
both, right?
Yeah. Instead of taking COVID positive people and putting them in a nursing home, for
Well,
example.
yeah, and I mean the other problem is how are they counting cases? And
Yeah.
it's not clear whether positive tests are all being counted as cases or not, because originally they were, and that would grossly inflate the numbers. And I'm just speaking right now from my heart. Like, I'd like to know how they're counting these cases, and the mortality, the numbers for the mortality. Why is it that there's almost zero mortality for the flu in 2020? And
Yeah. Where did that go?
that
And guess what? England, which is currently in a lockdown, they had more deaths in 2019 than they did in 2020.
yeah.
And of course, the regular flu, like the usual flus that you get, the A's and the B's, they just totally pretty much disappeared. So
Yeah,
how's
yeah,
that possible?
Even in Canada, the numbers of flu cases
They don't add up.
were almost non-existent, and then
Yeah.
they asterisked it on the website and then gave you a page of statistics afterwards. And I know because I accessed it and looked at it, and because I have a math background, I mean, they weren't saying a heck of a lot there, unfortunately. So, and then the WHO changing its website, retconning where it got its information from, first saying they got some info from China, and then retconning that, saying no, they were WHO observers, and then they just changed their definition in October of 2020 of what herd immunity is, and now getting herd immunity
Of course they did.
natural means is now no longer mentioned on the
Oh,
site.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Well,
So
let me ask you a question. With all of your
that's
experience,
concerning.
with all your experience, when have you ever heard of a vaccine that you would have to receive every 3 months because your immunity would only last that long?
Well, natural immunity typically lasts longer than vaccine immunity, and that's fairly well known. I'm not a virologist, just disclaimer. But
I'm just saying, like, just living as a human being, it never in my life have I heard that one. And I've had a number of shots in my life.
right. Well, I mean, the thing is this: the flu has hundreds of variations, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But COVID-19 has thousands. And so, them telling us that if you catch COVID-19, you're not going to be resistant or immune for long. Why doesn't that apply to the vaccine? Because looking at the vaccine science and the three vaccines that seem to be available now, Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, I may be wrong about the approval on the last one there, how recent that is. But I mean, they have slightly different mechanisms, but overall the same idea. It's a little bit frightening because they were able to bypass the animal testing due to the emergency order. And I recently did an interview with Dr. Pierre Corey, who had a Senate address imploring the committee to look at ivermectin, which is a well-known, decades-old anti-parasitic, anti-inflammatory used both in human and veterinary situations. That the data for it as a treatment for COVID-19 is actually very strong. And at the time I spoke to him, there were 46 randomized controlled trials, all of which showed a very positive result for ivermectin. And yet he's getting, in my last conversation with him, he's getting very little interest in that. His research group is still going strong. But the problem is, according to maintain the emergency order that allows them to bypass the animal testing and get the vaccine dispersed, there cannot be any other reasonable treatment for the virus. And
There
so
you
if
go.
they were to admit that there is, then they would lose the emergency status.
Big pharma isn't going to make their money.
So that's very, very concerning, because meanwhile, remdesivir, which is an antiretroviral, got approval. And I mean, it's very expensive, and there was not a lot of data for it. You know, forgive me if I can't quote the research on that right now. It's been months since I looked at it.
You just said the key word, Sam. It's very expensive, so
Yeah,
they can make money off it.
whereas ivermectin,
Why do you think they don't want people to know that hydroxychloroquine mixed with a Z-Pack and what is it, zinc?
yeah, zinc and
That mixture that was working, where we had doctors
yeah,
saying it was working.
it was definitely
They can't monetize it.
yeah.
You can't make money off of that because
Yeah,
these are old drugs.
There were studies allegedly manufactured to discredit hydroxychloroquine. I believe there's a French study where they were actually caught. But you know, you don't hear about this in the mainstream media, unfortunately, because of this kind of blackout. And unfortunately, there's a huge conflict of interest going on here with big tech and big pharma and communication in general. And this social media needs to define its place. They can't be both a purveyor of opinion and information. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely,
you can't be saying we freely publish whatever and then censor people, right? So free speech is very much under attack, and that is a really big issue. And regardless of the motivation, it can't be, because you'll see there will be a rebound, because there always is. So your intentions may be good, and you know, I mean, at best, some of the people involved, they may really have good intentions. They may really believe what they're doing is right. I'm just being very understanding here. I'm trying to be understanding, just like Dr. Corey was. But at the same time, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and you can't let that destroy the greater good of free speech. Okay, you just can't.
Yeah.
You can't, because we've seen what happens throughout history. There are countless lessons of that, and some very prominent recent ones. Okay.
Well, what is one of the first things the Nazis did to the population? They burned the books.
Exactly. And I mean,
and they kept them from speaking to each other. They kept them from posters and disseminating information.
Yeah.
And then there were the mandatory briefings.
Yeah.
And that was all brainwashing. So, you know, that's whenever you talk and see, and I would say that this whole thing with COVID and the vaccine, as well as the election, these are symptoms of a larger scheme going on. That is my belief, which is we are given the opportunity to choose. Do we want freedom? Do we want to be able to decide for ourselves what to put in our own bodies and what our health looks like and what we need? Or are we choosing to have someone else tell us all of that, to tell us what we need, to tell us what works for us, to tell us that we can't? I mean, seriously, you go out to dinner and you have the mask and as you're walking in, and then you sit down and you can take your mask off. That's what it is in New York right now. What did the virus decide that, well, you're eating dinner, so it's going to be very, very polite and not bother you because you're sitting down at the table now? I mean, I just walked through the whole restaurant with this mask on, and but I'm sitting in the same restaurant and now I don't have it on. Mm-hmm. What good is that doing anyway? I mean, can't we jump some common sense and go, that doesn't make any, the virus is so smart that it's going to let you eat your dinner.
Yeah, and apparently the virus can also discern between certain protests and other protests. Right? So I'm not saying whether these should be happening or not. I'm just saying it's like, oh, we'll just let them go at it here. It's like, the virus is not going to touch them. Don't worry. You know, and
the thing that really got me was looking at that that funeral that the congressman died. What's his name? White-haired guy that was politically ran for president. I can't think of his name. There was a funeral in the summer.
I'm sorry, I
cannot think of his name. He ran, I think he was a GOP candidate, and he died. And they had a funeral for him in when no one else was allowed to have a funeral, by the way, not a public one. And they were stupid enough to show pictures of his funeral and all the other congressmen that came in to say goodbye to him. And they were all sitting next to each other in very close spaces without any masks on. Mm. And I said, well, gee, now I really wish I could think of his name so that you could look up the pictures I'm talking about. But the audacity to tell people that they can't have a funeral for their loved ones that have passed on, and then they turn around and put on a public show of this funeral for this congressman. I just wanted to rip down walls when I saw that, because it is
Yeah.
the dishumanity in something like that. And even what my governor has done, Governor Cuomo, you know, he's been caught
Yeah.
how many times without his mask or socially congregating when meanwhile he's telling the rest of us that we can't. I mean, who's zooming who?
Politicians and officials that actually plan trips and leave. And I mean,
Yeah.
the number of Canadians somehow managing to get to Hawaii, it's astounding, you know. And
So, you know, you say to yourself, oh, it's okay for them to do it because somehow, I mean, this must be one brilliant virus. It knows when we're eating,
mhm.
it knows who it should attack and who it shouldn't, because, you know, they're politicians, so we can't take them down.
Well, I mean, part of
It's ridiculous.
the premise is very flawed, right? So it's like, we don't talk about SARS anymore. We don't talk about swine flu anymore. There were attempts to create vaccines for them. They failed. But these viruses, these coronaviruses are out there. And to a large extent, they're seasonal. And yet, why do we not talk about them anymore? Because we've developed a herd immunity, or there's not enough people around who are contagious, right? So this is what's going to happen with COVID-19. And the problem is more and more people are going to be testing positive for it because it's just spreading. It's just spreading out there. And I mean, there's evidence you can test positive for a very long time. So the numbers, the case numbers, if they're just being counted as cases with positive tests, that's not an accurate way to count cases, especially seeing as probably the majority of those positive tests are asymptomatic. And you know, the Chinese completed a huge study. So either listen to the Chinese or you don't listen to the Chinese. So government officials, make up your mind. If you listen to them, they just completed a huge study, which basically said, you know, basically the conclusion was asymptomatic transmission doesn't really occur. Okay, which was stated in June of 2020 by a WHO official, and they hastily retracted that comment days later. And yet, if we know that if you're asymptomatic, likely your viral load is low, and you're not coughing, you're not in the virus, you're not propagating it on water droplets, you're not, you know what I mean? And so this kind of makes sense that, you know, asymptomatic transmission is extremely low to nil. And yet why the measures, why the lockdowns, why the, you know what I mean? When the majority of people testing positive are largely asymptomatic, the vulnerable people are truly vulnerable. COVID-19 is nasty. When you have a comorbidity and you're older, or both, it is really nasty. It attacks your lungs. You asphyxiate, you get a shortness of breath like nothing that's seen. I have friends that are working in ICUs and in clinics and hospitals. Clinics, not so much now, but it's a horrible way to go. And the problem is, I mean, the people with the comorbidities, they hang on. They literally hang on for weeks with very low oxygen sats. They literally hang on to life, and you give them oxygen. It's just awful. The ventilators proved not to be a good idea early on because you're blowing out the alveoli with mechanical damage. But you know, that was a treatment, an older treatment protocol, which they implemented, probably not knowing any better. But there was also a financial incentive in the U.S. to use these ventilators. But now we know you give them oxygen, but it looks like ivermectin is very effective in that treatment, and yet it can't get approval, at least not at this stage. And Dr. Corey gave a Senate testimony December the 8th, I believe. That was just over a month ago. And yet, last I spoke to his secretary, you know, they had not been contacted by the CDC or the NIH or anybody in power that could smooth that type of approval process. Apparently,
it's the same thing with Trump. I mean, he had, you know, he had teams of doctors that were talking about the hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and Z-Pak, you know, or just vitamin D. So it's interesting. My husband happened onto a article about, it was a woman who does post-mortem biochemical, I guess you would know what that is. It's the chemistry, the blood works and stuff of people that have died.
Okay,
and
so it's pathological. It's part of the pathology, right? It's
yeah, and she's a virologist too, I guess. But she was talking about doing a study of people that had died with COVID designation, and she said in every case, that she did some research with, which were quite a few cases. They were either severely vitamin D deficient or vitamin D deficient.
Yeah, yeah, I've actually read about that, and
Yeah.
yeah, there's no question. And I mean, even going about normal life, like when I used to work in family clinic as a resident, I was told don't test for vitamin D because pretty well everyone's deficient. I mean, that's a scary thing, right? But if you go to the
Especially
store,
if you live in Canada or New
oh
York, we
yeah,
don't get a lot of sunlight. So,
absolutely, absolutely. But
yeah,
you go to drugstores and things, and you look for zinc or vitamin D, and they were all out starting in March. They were all out,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
people taking the vitamin D, and even in Dr. Corey's protocols, there's a mention of vitamin D in them. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but and I mean, vitamin D is a hormone, and it does so many different things. It's almost unconscionable not to mention it, even as something to take as a daily supplement, or at least to get your vitamin, because big pharma, big food, they're interrelated, right?
They're not making their money on that, are they? They can't make their money on supplements.
Well, I mean, that's just it. And so I mean, where are we going with this? I mean, we could talk about this forever, but there's a lot of discrepancies. The unfortunately the official narrative is fraught with the irony is that I would call some of it misinformation for sure, because the story that changes, and even the websites changing their story. And certain individuals have been discredited. I've seen even Wikipedia entries changing, and people are not trusting the media anymore. I know when I go out and I talk to people here, if I'm doing grocery shopping and such, and sometimes a conversation is struck with, with the deli girl or something. And it's like, nobody trusts mainstream media anymore, at least here where I live. I don't know, maybe in the US it's different. There seems to be much more reliance on these big stations, but I mean, I stopped watching news years ago when it became very clear the bias. I mean, I think as a people, Canadians are less taken by that. We're somewhat more cosmopolitan. We're not sophisticated. I depending on the use of that word, but I guess we are. We are, and we're an intelligent audience that really we're not taken easily. We're polite, but we're not taken in easily, and so we scrutinize things more thoroughly, and we know there's other sources of information. We know there's other perspectives, so we're more cynical in that way. And
well, I think you're going to find that Americans are a lot more cynical too than the mainstream media would have you believe.
Yeah, I hope
it's just that mainstream media, like you're talking about, has got an absolute chokehold and has shut down even the ability to host sites that do want to put the information out, even as alternative information. I mean, you're banned, you're shut down. Since when?
Yeah.
In your lifetime, have you ever heard that American president was not being covered by the media? Refused coverage.
Yeah.
When in your lifetime have you ever heard that as even being a consideration?
Well, and especially if there's an excuse that, we're trying to prevent him inciting violence. It's like, well, wait a minute. Over the
He
summer,
didn't.
There was inciting of violence from certain, factions on Twitter over and over and over. Nobody shut them down.
When Black Lives Matters happened?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
That and some other things. Like, don't use it as an excuse.
How many months, how many weeks did the cities burn and loot and explode? And then they defunded the police.
Oh, the best. And
I mean, we haven't forgotten about that, have we?
No, but this goes beyond Biden and Trump also. Like, I mean, when you get people who for 4 years are trying to prove Russian collusion, and foreign interference in the election. And then, when the same thing happens now where the other side is trying to prove interference, and they say, well, why can't we all just get along? And it's like the very same people that were fighting for years and not willing to get along now all want to get along.
Yeah.
So to me, that's incredibly inconsistent, almost pathologically so, right?
It is pathological, and I just want to bring it around to spiritual matters if I can, because I feel like that's where my comfort zone is, and I got some weird shadow in my image, and I'm trying to get rid of it. So I'm sorry, I'm mooching.
Keep talking.
But I think that if we could see, I can't get rid of that light thingy in the air, so maybe all right, I'm trying.
Halo, Sue. You've got a halo.
Okay, yay, I've earned it.
Oh dear. It's a little tarnished though. It's a little.
If you asked my husband, he would laugh at you. He'd go, yeah, okay. She got that at the thrift store. So, so what I was going to come around to, and I think that I can just speak from my heart and all of my experiences in life, which is, first of all, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And so if we're not totally taken in by what people tell you to think, and we just stop a minute and observe, then we'll be able to see, people will be able to see that they're being lied to. So that's the first thing I want to say is I'm not going to tell you what you should think. I'm going to tell you to start thinking. Stop following blindly, or because this isn't about politics and this isn't about a virus. This is about control versus freedom. And we are, as human beings, for the first time in hundreds and hundreds of years, raising our consciousness to start to see the control that has been exercised over us since before Roman times by a few families that have, proliferated over the years and have control of all. And we just don't know it. And we've been lied to for so long that it doesn't feel like a lie anymore. But I'm just asking people to get reconnected with their inner wisdom that has never left them. Maybe they've never been connected to it, or maybe they just ignored it for so long, or they think someone outside of them has their answers for them. And I'm here to help people find their personal power. And that is not in following anybody else. We can listen to other people's commentaries and their research and their proclamations of what is going on, but what the impetus is on us to feel into what is our truth and what do we believe, and also observe. Like that example I gave you about the funeral, and I can see him like he's standing in front of me, but I can't think of his name, darn it.
All right.
The one that died. That blew my mind because my cousin's mother had just passed away. So she's my cousin by marriage, so she wasn't my aunt that passed away, but my cousin's mother passed away, who she was very close to. She could not have a funeral. And then they turned around and had this bloke's funeral, and all the congressmen were there and women, and sitting very close to each other with no mask, and it was such a slap in the face. So what I'm saying to people is observe. What are these people that are setting down the rules doing themselves? And if there's a hypocrisy there, then start asking yourself, why? Why? And who do you want telling you how to live your life? In New York, I don't know how it is in Canada, but there used to be the ability that if your child was going to public school, that you could opt out of vaccines with a religious exemption. That's been taken away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're being forced. And I don't like it. I'm going to say I'm fully vaccinated. I was as a child. My parents believed in vaccinations, and even when I was in the Army, they did my blood work and they updated 2 of mine, and I'm fine. And I'll say that that's because I believe I'm fine. I believe in 100% health, and I believe in control over my own body, in the sense that if I believe in health, that this is what I will be, is healthy. Now, for people that don't have those understandings about their own creationship and their own health, don't they deserve a choice? So that's my shtick, Sam. I'm all about personal responsibility. I'm all about finding our own truth. I'm all about discerning using your instinct and your heart, because those are the tools that we have available to us in a world where we've forgotten where we come from, that we are creator beings. So use those intuitions, use those gut feelings, and keep asking questions.
You know, Sue, I can't think of a better way to end this interview, actually. Um, I still have some questions for you. There were still some terms that I wanted to go over, like, soul plan and anchoring feelings that you do in session and things like this. But I think maybe we can put that off to another day because I really like your message there, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. And I'd love to come back if you want to do it again. And thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to for me to be able to give people some insight into what quantum healing is.
Yeah, and I mean, your knowledge is it can be said to be esoteric, right? And I've said this about other guests in the past, but you're not shoving it down anybody's throat, and you're not insisting that it's the only way. So
Oh gosh, no.
you practice what you preach. When we were just talking about, people thinking they're right and then censoring everybody else, I mean, that's just blatantly wrong on a very high level, right? And I mean, you're practicing what you preach. And I very much enjoyed this interview, and you were very open, and we had some nice discussions, even on the phone, about it. And you're humble and open. And open to my interpretation of things, and I mean, it's why I agreed to do the interview. You know,
Yeah. And I'll just, if you don't mind,
please,
I'll
go ahead.
quick, I know you want to wrap up and I'm
No,
good
no,
with
no.
that, but
Hey, I was wondering if you had something to do. I have no life,
what,
right? So,
no, I'm yours for today, dear, whatever, however long you want to go. But what I just wanted to go back to is what I mentioned earlier about the placebo effect.
yeah,
And this ties into quantum healing. And this is what I have on my website, which is whatever we believe will heal us, will heal us. And so if that's Western medicine, so if I'm a cancer patient, and there's studies
oh,
behind what I'm
placebo
about to
is a
say,
legitimate effect. Like placebo is a well.
if they believe that the chemo and the radiation and whatever else the doctors are doing, if they believe in the treatment and they believe in the doctor, then the therapy is effective
More effective.
because they're allowing it, or more effective. If a person absolutely has decided in their mind that this thing is going to get them and it's going to kill them, then chances are it's going to get them and kill them. Now, why does the placebo work? Why are people, and that's a question that doctors and scientists have asked for a long time now. And it boils down to psychology, and it boils down to the body mind
Right.
emotional connection.
Yeah, it flew in the face of the paradigm, right? The medical paradigm. It was time for a new paradigm. Because if you talked about this decades ago, oh, it's all in your mind, and mind and body are two aspects to the same thing, right? So you can't separate the two. At least now, that's the approach of a lot of practitioners, right? When you talk about functional medicine or integrated medicine, and they see, wow, there's actually some things going on in the brain with these mood imbalances,
Yes.
mental imbalances, mental disorders. It's like things that we thought were purely mind. There's some physical, manifestation, and then physical, causes can produce a psychological and emotional effect. You know,
Absolutely.
you go as far back as Patch Adams, Dr. Patch Adams, and laughter therapy, right? Like my dad knew Patch Adams, and he was the laughing stock, like in a bad way, originally, and then he literally had hundreds of doctors wanting to work with him afterwards, and so that was an early start, but in the East they've known about this connection forever because it was based in their philosophy, right, in their ideology.
Yeah.
But here,
Yeah.
a lot of it had to do with the way science manifested, the scientific method, hypothesis, proving hypotheses, that in the ancient Greeks, right? And so it became a more mechanistic, more reductionistic approach. And so, we had to create terms like, synergy and holism and holistic. And, these ideas had to come into play more so when we were looking at, the human body is a complex system, including your volition, your thoughts, and how you metabolize
Yes.
reality, and how that can actually affect your body.
And how your thoughts affect your emotions
Yeah,
and your body chemistry. That's all connected. And I don't think that comes out as often as it should be. But I want to bring you back to do you know who Dr. Brian Weiss is?
that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he wrote many books, but he just popped into my head. The one I'm thinking of is Many Lives, Many
Yes, yes,
Masters. And that was one of my first books that got me into, once I had had my own experiences, got me more into understanding what hypnosis is about and also past lives. But the reason I bring him up is because he is a psychiatrist, a medical doctor and a psychiatrist. And when his first client, see that book, Many Lives, Many Masters, it talks about the client that changed his life. When he worked with this woman for quite some time, she had, I think, generalized anxiety disorder with panic attacks or something like that. And he just could not, through typical psychotherapy, help her find any relief. So through all the exploration and work he did with her, she wasn't having results. And so on a whim, of course, he was trained in hypnotherapy, but he decided to do a session with her. And that's when she went into a past life and started explaining things. And then, by the way, during that first life that she went into the in-between place too, where you could talk to your spirit team. She answered questions for him, told him things about his own private family that she could have never known. And that's what blew him away. So the reason I bring all this up is you've got a person that's fully ingrained and fully grounded in science and what science knows at this time to do for this person that came into his office for help. And then through use of different techniques, because he really wanted to help her, he felt badly that this client wasn't getting any relief. So through using other techniques, he tapped into something that changed his world. And even he didn't believe it at first. He had a lot of cognitive dissonance about what had happened in that office. And then she agreed to do more sessions because lo and behold, her anxiety was going away as she was exploring through hypnosis with him the traumas that she had in other lifetimes that carried over and showed presented as anxiety in this lifetime. She was getting better. And he even said in this book, at some point I got to the understanding and okay with it because whether it was real or imagined, she's getting better and I can't argue with results. And I thought that was a statement of intense wisdom. So you can say what I do is woo-woo and it's crazy and it's all these things and it's all in our heads. But I'll take the results I'm getting with my clients any day over any science or study or research. Because when people write to me or people walk out of my house or leave a session and they say to me, things are more clear than they've ever been in my life. And I feel, thank you for helping me find my own power. I don't care if it's their imagination. I don't care if it's bullshit. Excuse my language.
That's okay.
If it helped that person and they moving forward feel more powerful and more energized and more clear about how they're going to make their life better, that's all that matters to me.
So I'm not going to say it's woo woo because as I mentioned to you earlier in the discussion, I think you could argue that woo woo is present in every religion because that's a conduit of spirituality, right? It may not be the best conduit, and certainly we've had problems with various religious orders over the years. I mean, look at what the Catholic Church did. Poor Galileo. God, I mean, in the Inquisition. I mean, where does it end? But at the same time, these are human beings trying to create a tradition, a ritual based on their spirituality, right? So I'm not going to say it's woo, but would you say that this is your religion? Now I know
No.
that's a loaded question because I'd like to expand the definition of religion to include, you know, everything. But for many, religion is a dirty word. And almost, if you look at the pattern over time, people who push away religion come up with beliefs based on what they feel to be their truth, and they don't feel it's religion. They never feel it's religion. But then some people might think, okay, what they're believing, I don't really believe. We're going to build on that. We're going to push that aside, and we're going to come up with their own beliefs. And then that's their religion. I'm just saying that. Could it be perceived as such if we expand the definition of religion, or is that is that a dirty word, Sue?
No, it can be perceived as me practicing my religion, and I'll explain that. I think my religion is God and love. I think ultimately all there is love and fear. So if I'm loving you or I'm doing something that helps you to love yourself, which is me loving you, then I'm practicing my religion. Anything that isn't love is a product or a byproduct of fear. So I don't promote fear, and I won't engage in it. So I don't believe in victim mentality either. But if someone's in victim mentality, I'll give them compassion and I'll help them work through it.
So is that your religion, or is that your spirituality?
It's my religion. It's my spirituality. It's all we are. That's my belief. And I think that anything that you read or engage in that brings about fear, then that's not good for you. So even if it is reading a report on some kind of scientific evidence or things like of that nature, because that's allowing permission for something outside of yourself to have control of you. So I'm not worried about the election. People are losing their minds over this thing. I'm not worried about it because I know the timeline I'm on, and it's a good one, and it's where people are coming together in unity consciousness. We're going to be helping each other out. It's no more each one for himself, because we're starting to realize that we are all one. And so if I help you, I'm also helping myself. We're creating a better reality by way of we're getting rid of disease. We're getting rid of disharmonious arguments over control. It's going to go to unity and cooperation. And hey, you're good at that, so you're going to do that for me, and I'm good at this, I'm going to do this for you. And back to simpler things. We're not going to be so attached to money, and well, money's a necessary thing, but I would never call it evil. We're not going to be so attached to materialism. We're going to realize that, you know, if I don't work as hard, I'll have more time with my family, and my relationship with my family is far more important than the kind of car I drive, for example. I hope that we get there. Because after all, a car is only a temporary thing, and it's only made of metal and plastic and whatever else it's made of, but our relationships are forever.
Wow.
So that's my religion. It's love, right? I know it sounds super corny. I apologize.
No. I mean, I don't know what you would have me say, but I find that so not corny.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I know sometimes I don't know how I sound.
No, but I know at least one person would agree with you, and that's Wonder Woman, right? But Sue, I think maybe it's time to wrap this up for now. But you know what? I'd love to do this again sometime. Could you give us a website where people can get more information?
Oh yeah, sure.
Multiple websites.
Okay. Well, I only have. Yeah. Let me pull that up for you really quick. Sure. So quantumhealers.com is a website where you can find people that do the kind of work I do, but they also do more. It isn't just QHHT, it's beyond quantum healing, it's Reiki healing, it's psychics, it's people that do quantum touch, which I can't purport to know what that is, but it's really good from what I've heard. So quantumhealers.com. My personal website is quantumexplorations.com.
Quantumexplorations.com, all one word. Okay.
And you can find me on Facebook under that name. And I can't wait to talk to you again. It was so much fun.
Yeah, for sure. So don't go anywhere. I'm going to sign off for us. So on behalf of Agora Media and the Toronto Business Journal, I'm Dr. Sam Dubé, aka Super Sam Dubé, if you've been following these interviews for a while. I would like to bid adieu and Godspeed to Sue Beckley, QHHT practitioner, among many other things, who has been very humble and giving in her sharing of her beliefs and the help that she's provided for people over the years. And it was a wonderful interview, and I'm really happy to have met you and to have had these discussions with you, Sue.
Yeah, back at you, Sam. It's been so much fun. I look forward to working with you again.
That would be my honor. Thank you so much, Sue. And don't go away. Godspeed.
You too.